Hello and welcome to Global Sanctuary for Elephants podcast, Global Rumblings. Global Sanctuary for Elephants, or GSE for short, is a non-profit organization with a mission to create vast safe spaces for captive elephants where they are able to heal physically and emotionally, often from very traumatic pasts. I'm your host, Nadia Mari, and I'll be taking you to the lush jungle of the Mato Grosso region in central Brazil, home of GSE's initial project, Elephant Sanctuary Brazil. Currently home to 6 female Asian elephants, lovingly referred to as the girls. Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Global Rumblings. I am, of course, joined again by Kat and Scott Blaze, co-founders of Global Sanctuary for Elephants, and we will be talking more about Guida and Maia and their first weeks and months at the sanctuary. Hello, Kat. Hello, Scott.
Hey, Nadia.
Hey, Nadia. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. It's actually full moon today.
Sweet. It must be getting close to coming out for you, yeah?
Yeah. We're a little bit later today with the recording. So yeah, by the time I go upstairs from my office, then it should be dark. So full moon. So are elephants nocturnal?
No, elephants are not nocturnal. Their behavior is often it's dictated by a lot of things, but as far as their activity at night, it's often influenced by temperature. So they are active during the day, but if it's really warm, they're a little on the lazy side. Some of them will take naps. Some of them just prefer standing naps under a tree. And then once it cools down and the sun sets, then they become very active. They'll still sleep at night. We still see them standing over each other, sometimes not till 2:00 in the morning or anything like that. And it's short naps. They're elephants.
We find their little nests at night.
We do.
Or the next day we find their little nests where they've been sleeping.
Oh.
Yeah, we have actually, going back to the sanctuary in Tennessee, we saw a lot of activity at night, and we were questioning it because it's not something we had seen in other facilities. But again, in most other facilities, they don't have the autonomy to go explore at night.
A lot of places don't give them access at night. There's this fear of, what are they going to do at night? They could do something and nobody's here. And, the reality is there's not anything they're going to do at night that they can't do during the day. And for us, people live on grounds. So we hear when they have their little trumpet parties in the middle of the night, when Bambi wakes up and Mara has left her, and then she has to call her and make her come back. And then they have to have a party when they all get together. And, so we hear all of that go on with the way the houses are set up at the tops of the valleys. The sound carries up. So there's no concern with allowing them that space at night, especially since we know just how profound it seems to be with their socialization and their development.
Yeah, when we saw it in Tennessee, we were talking to a researcher in Asia, and he said, no, it's very common. A lot of it is weather dependent, cooler at night, more time for exploration. There was actually that presentation that Joyce did, remember at the one conference, and they showed the activity level at night was increased because of more safety. It's more difficult to be seen at night, so they explored more. So safety from poachers, and they saw that change drastically when there was full moon. Yeah. So it's really interesting how all of that dictated. But here at the sanctuary, definitely we see a lot of exploration at night. And Maya is known for being morning girl zombie. She has
listen, no judgment. I feel the same way in the morning, so I'm not
to my liking.
This goes back. Yeah, this goes way back. Early on, even when we just had the first yard, and they would be really active at night, and they'd come in the morning, and the keepers were cleaning the yards and stuff, and we do their checkups and started working on foot trimming and other things. And Mara would have breakfast and then fall asleep in the little treatment area. And she would not wake up. You'd be shaking buckets of produce. You'd be, come on, Maya, let's go. And nope, she had definitely breakfast food coma and induced by early morning zombie party.
Yeah, it was absolutely one of those things when she was done with breakfast. It's like, hurry up and get her out before she crashes, because otherwise it's going to be 2 hours before she ends up wherever she should be going.
No, and she would just fall asleep in that chute and she would not go anywhere.
Yeah.
No.
And I mean, the reality is it's, whatever. If that's what makes her happy, is taking a nap on her way out of the barn in the shade and just hanging out for an extra however long.
But it's also nice to see, because that's the treatment area is like a little corridor. It's a little chute area, relatively small. So they don't have a lot of movement. And for her to be so comfortable as she was so early on in the process here.
Especially how she was the first time she went into the chute.
Yes, and this ties back into what Nadia talked the other day about, which the other episode, which was who they were versus who they are. Mm-hmm. And we talked about Maya being the bad girl.
We're like parents. We're going to do that a million times during the podcast. Sorry. We do know our elephants' names. It's just...
I go through the whole list sometimes when I'm doing treatment now. I was like, thank you, Hannah. I mean, Gija. I mean, Bambi. No, you're one of the M elephants. Which one are you? But the first time she was fully closed in the restraint chute, she was shaking. And she had been calm in there, had progress of, slow adaptation.
Because it's how they get from inside the barn to outside. We had the chutes designed that way. So it's an area that they are comfortable with, versus a lot of facilities have these treatment chutes that are areas that they never go in. So when you ask them to go in these areas, there's already that anxiety of, well, this is never a good thing. What's going to happen? So instead, our treatment chutes are exits to the barn. So everybody's used to them. But
you don't want the scenario where the dog only goes in the car when it's time to go to the vet. You want it to be going on constant, so they're very acclimated to it. She was very comfortable going back and forth. She was sleeping in them.
Sure.
And then when you would, we'd close one gate, then close the other gate. And the first time we closed both gates, she was shaking, literally shaking from anxiety, from nervousness. And it was only for a few seconds.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as she reacted like that, we opened it right back up and let her go out and showed her it's not a bad thing, but it is part of that circus life. Yeah. And you started seeing that insecurity, when she didn't have that big giant bundle of joy, bundle of energy presence, she was very insecure with a lot of things like that, a lot of new things. The first time we had to do an injection, same thing. She was terrified of the needle, even just seeing the needle, and that's, we have seen these big, tough elephants that have that big boisterous presence and, just take it all in stride and don't think much of it. But then Maya was different. She was very, I guess, insecure, very, that big presence was just a mask for a little insecure child on the inside.
You had said that she had been classed as the bad elephant in the circus. I can't imagine then what being a bad elephant meant versus being the good elephant Guida. And so I don't know, probably beatings and things like that. Chute where she can't move in and out and doesn't know what's happening, that would probably bring back trauma. But as you said, you can open it up and they can just walk straight in. So if they're not interested in treatment or whatever you're doing in the chute, they can just walk straight out. And as you said, it's all on elephant time.
Yeah. And what happens at the circus or what happens here in the circus, we don't really know. I can tell you what I've seen with those elephants that were labeled the bad elephants as Maya was, and what happened in the United States. And, they would get hit for no reason. They would just walk by and hit just to for people to feel like they were keeping them in line. And
didn't you once say that, they would take them when they were on the road to some little area where nobody could see and hit them. So it doesn't seem that far off that, you close her in this tiny little space and she's not really sure that this is not going to go poorly. Yeah.
No, but there's a lot of trust that has to be built. We talked about the celebrations on the first couple of days, but there's still a lot that they go through. And, the joy in the first couple of days is exciting. It's wonderful, but that because of the trauma that they've endured, that recovery process is long. It's very involved. And you have these moments of insecurity, and they have moments where maybe we overstepped our boundaries in this. Maybe she wasn't ready to be closing the restraint chute, but you have to try at some point. You have to read the room and see, and then you realize, wait a minute, she's not quite ready. So you just take that step back. And that's part of them learning who we are and learning that we're not going to keep them in that uncomfortable place.
Sure.
As soon as we see that, we're going to respond to it. If they have fear, if they have anxiety, we're going to respond to it to try to eliminate that. And that starts to help them gain trust in what we're seeing, what we're observing. And trusting that we're not going to put them in these negative scenarios.
Yeah, I think it's not only that we're seeing what they're trying to communicate, but that we respond accordingly, because they've had people, most of them in their past, that, see behaviors that they understand, but they just don't care.
Yeah. And what happened with Maya when she was on chains, her chain was always shorter. Guida would be allowed more freedom than Maya was always, because they were never sure. Maya actually was on 2 chains, versus Guida being on 1 because of how she broke things and how she got away. But it was very different to see her here, and, very playful, very silly, but also had to go through a lot of self-discovery for who she truly was when she took that mask off.
So was Guida then, did she remain boss all the time during their relationship, or does it sort of change in a herd, the roles?
Well, defining boss is the first step of that. It's not like she dictated, what they did or didn't do, but Maya wasn't able to force Guida into any, doing things that Guida wanted to do. If Guida was ready, if Guida wanted it, everything was all good. If Guida didn't want it, then it just didn't happen. And a big part of what happened early on was Maya understanding or learning respect for Guida's space during meal times, because Guida ate a little slower. Maya shoved all the food in her mouth and then quickly went over to Guida and went to go steal Guida's food. And many times Guida would just walk away and leave her food and just walk away. And it wasn't about the food for Maya. It was about coming over to have that interaction, positive or negative. Even if she was stealing the food, she still wanted the interaction. And you could see what that did to Maya. You could see the change in her expression. It's like, oh, that's not what I wanted. You didn't have to walk away. And Guida has that. Our interpretation is, well, if you're going to come invade my space while I'm eating dinner, I don't want that. I'm not going to tolerate that. I'm not going to stand here for that and let you bully me this way. And not bullying in a way of physical, but bullying in a way of being domineering and controlling of that time. And that's where Guida, when we say Guida being the boss, Guida would kind of control those scenarios a little bit more and not allow that to develop in a way that Guida wasn't comfortable with.
So how long did they then stay in the first yard?
I'm looking at Kat to see if she has some sort of time that illuminates on her face, but I don't have any clue.
Time is never something I have an answer for.
I have no clue on that, Nadia, at all. I can tell you, and this is actually...
For the second yard, it was almost... I don't want to say almost a year, but it was long. And then it was much less for the third yard. I don't remember what the deal was, but...
Money, always money.
But yeah, it wasn't as quick as we would have liked, but those are the things that you don't really have control over.
We can go back and look at those dates.
Does the first yard include the ponds as well that I saw when I was with you?
There was a mud wallow. Yeah.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, just a tiny little mud wallow. It's a small yard. I mean, it wasn't very big at all. But they, again, even in that small space, they did really well considering it was a small space. When we did open up the second space, which again wasn't huge by any means, especially by sanctuary standards, not big. But that's when Guida was doing the 3 steps in Rumble, and you get to tell that one.
No, it was just this. I mean, you feel a lot when you work with elephants, and there are always things you never know if you're interpreting properly. And anybody who says that they're 100% certain of what they're observing has like a giant ego or is totally clueless, one or the other. You never 100% know. And this is one of the times where there was just this level of gratitude that you felt pouring off of her. I mean, like you said, it was the second yard is a little bit bigger than the first. Again, we're not giving them 70 acres. And it was that thing of they walked through the gate into the second yard, and it was maybe like 10 steps in initially. And then you could hear her. She stopped and she rumbled and she looked at you and it was like, ooh. But then she would only take a few more steps and she'd look around and touch other things and she'd rumble and look at you. And it was, I was like, wow, this is, I mean, in a way it's pathetic. You know, it wasn't this giant space we were giving her, but it seemed like just 4 acres was more than she had ever had, clearly, but possibly more than she had ever expected she would have in her entire life. And it was just, it brought so much to her that in one way it's so sweet, and another way it's so pathetic that they have so little generally, that this is the response you get for a yard that's, I mean, it's lovely, don't get me wrong, but that's nothing compared to what they have now.
And I think the first 2 yards were under 2 acres still. It was like a half an acre and an acre.
I'm going to have to look up what that is in metric.
No, square meters. I can't do square meters. My brain doesn't work that fast anymore. But yeah, it's not a large space at all. And, but even that, as Kat's saying, was making a beautiful difference. And there was just a levity about her too. There's a lightness as she was exploring that new yard. And as Kat said, a gratitude for the best way we can interpret that. But then we started, that's when she became our little rumble bug. I mean, she was always rumbling at that point, and the morning, afternoon treatments, it didn't matter what we were doing with her. She was rumbling all the time.
In that moment, it was very much that childlike, really light face. And people ask, do elephants smile? Because we'll talk about, they're smiling. Yes, they do something that looks like a smile that you can absolutely, if you know the elephant, it's clear to see on their faces. And it was like the big bright eyes, really light face, cheeky grin. And she was just all about it.
So in the other episode, you said that there can be happy rumbles and sad rumbles. And your podcast is called Global Rumblings. So what do rumbles actually mean? So why wasn't she trumpeting, I'll say? Why did she rumble? Why do elephants rumble, and when do they rumble?
They rumble when they get into a new yard for the first time. It changes. It's different all the time,
And it's different for each elephant. Yeah. Some of them do it all the time, and some of them it's very infrequent. Yeah, there's the vocalization of choice, I shouldn't say of choice, but of what's the word I'm looking for?
Choice?
I don't know. Most common. There's
a vocalization that is most comfortable for some individuals. Bambi, my God, that girl rumbles. I mean, that girl rumbles all the time, and huge giant rumbles.
Yeah. We can hear her from up at the house.
But others don't rumble as much. Mara does not rumble quite as much.
No, but she makes her squeaky noise all the time.
Right. So sometimes it's just a matter of preference, or what comfort they have. But for the most part, for rumbles, the general rumble, the very soft, very sincere, it is
like a cat purr. A lot of people think in a relatable way to a different noise. It's similar in sound, but a lot bigger.
Okay.
It's passive. It's sweet. It's content. It is, it's a very sincere vocalization, where a very heartfelt vocalization. And it is something that, again, I think contentment is the most, and again, as Kat said, gratitude. We see that sometimes when we're doing treatment, or if you're doing something, with an elephant that, if they have an injury or something you have to clean, and you show that you're being, respectful and empathetic to the scenario, sometimes they will rumble, once you're done doing the treatment. Sometimes they rumble during the treatment. In that case, it's almost like, oh, this hurts a little bit, so there can be some subtleties with that, but most of the time it is a very heartfelt, very sincere, very, very deep, soulful expression.
That makes their forehead vibrate.
Yeah, we'll have to definitely have one episode just talking about vocalization. In the previous episode, you said that it took a few months before Guida and Maia really became friends. How can we understand that? How did you see them becoming friends? You talk about how Guida was strong enough mentally to say to Maya, I'm not having any of your nonsense, and just walking away. So she's developing, and Maya then obviously having to, I presume, respect that, because the dynamics are changing. But how did you see that they are becoming friends? Because that's a very sort of anthropomorphic, very human things to say.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably say they were friends early on, loose friends, though, just kind of occupying space, but being friendly and having moments together and that sort of thing. But it was the months later that they became really, really bonded to each other. And the friendship went from, a friendship of somebody you see every once in a while and call every once in a while to someone who is your best friend and you tell everything. And so it was a definite shift, but I'll let you take that one.
It evolved through those first 3 yards. It evolved as we expanded. But early on, within the first months, you could see Maya learning to respect Guida's space more. And when she learned to respect Guida's space more, then Guida was more relaxed. And then when Guida was more relaxed, of course, then everything was, Maya was able to spend more time and Maya was less invasive. But there were still times when Maya would become overly exuberant and Guida would play for a little while. It's like, nope, I'm going to walk away now. And the longer that went on, the longer the longer they were here, after Maya respecting her space and then periodically overstepping that boundary, you could see it hurt Maya more. You could see that, that Guida walking away really caused her an emotional discomfort. And she responded more harshly to that in terms of internalizing it more. And then you could see her come back immediately after and be much substantially more respectful, much more pensive with how she was approaching Guida when she was approaching Guida, watching to see where Guida was. And again, Guida never did anything negative. It wasn't like, she never lashed out. She would just simply walk away. But that level of respect changed. But for me, it was most obvious after they had the largest yard 4. We could see them spending more time together in first 3 yards, but again, they're very relatively small yards. When they first started exploring yard 4, they went in different directions all the time, and they were always rumbling back and forth. They always seemed to be in contact with each other.
How many acres is yard 4?
That I can say in hectares is 16 hectares, and that is about like 30 acres. So that yard is substantially larger. There's more hills. There's a lot of trees. There's a larger pond. And you could hear them rumbling back and forth. You can hear them calling to make sure they knew where each other were. And then it went from that, just calling each other, to seeing them in much closer proximity on a regular basis. And you could see a different level of appreciation when they did come back together. And one thing that we saw on a drone, actually, the first time we took Wally up, we flew Wally up over the pond, and we were shocked and amazed and incredibly touched for Wally's very first photo to be one of Guida laying down, Maya laying down, and Guida standing over top of her to protect her from the sun. And that was one of those moments like, this is really happening, because you see the moments that were there, but there's a lot of time that we can't see them. They're in the middle of the forest. We can't see exactly what's going on. We see those what's happening when we're not there, and to see this happening when we're not there was one of those moments that you just say, this is what sanctuary is all about.
And Guida was all about, she was going to protect Maya from the drone if she had to, which was quite entertaining. It's like, really? It's okay. We'll back off. It's fine. But yeah, she was gonna, even still wispy and underweight, she of course started doing much better when she got here, but she was ready to protect her sister. It was very charming.
And there's a time in their relationship that was not only the relationship, but also their personal growth as well. And this has happened multiple times in our history with working with elephants in sanctuary, where you see something different about them, but you don't always say anything about it right away. And it's like, it's just a moment in time. And then you see it again. It's like, wow, this is really this is really happening. And I remember one time coming up, and I don't remember if I said it to you or you said it to me, but it was something like, have you noticed? And before you even finish the sentence, like how bright they are, there's just this luminosity. What's what I'm looking for? There's luminosity about them that is just brilliant. It is just, they're so vibrant. They just grew so profoundly. And that's when you see the true shift in their physical presence, but it's because of the emotional and the psychological growth that you see that, not because of, their physical strength or anything like that. That is not because, as we talked before, it's, the physical manifestation of sanctuary is not as profound as the emotional and psychological. And when we see that, again, that vibrant,
they just look different. You've looked at them every day for however many months, and one day you go out and they just look different. And it's so hard to put into words. But again, we go up to each other and you're like, did you notice? Or am I delusional? Or am I putting my own emotions on them? So it's actually very entertaining to go up and not even be able to finish the sentence of, oh my God, yes, I'm so glad you're seeing it too. But yeah.
I think radiance is one of the words we have described them as before. It's like, it's just different, Nadia. And it's so hard to explain. It's so hard to share that part with people because you can't document it. You can see it in some of the videos with certainty, but it's the intangible.
And to say they look more elephant, like Maya is our elephant. For me, out of everybody, she looks the most elephant. And it is a presence. It is a strength. It is a radiance that so many elephants lose in captivity. It is that when you say you look at an elephant and what you're seeing in captivity is a shell of a being of who they should be. And I think it just gets to a point when they're at sanctuary that shell falls away and you see who they really are. And
talking of physical, you mentioned a few times that Guida was severely underweight. I can imagine obviously walking and physical exercise. So she puts on muscle, or elephants put on muscle. But how fast do elephants then gain weight through eating? And does one have to take care that they don't overeat and then suddenly get too fat?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's different, just like people. Some people can eat a cheeseburger or 5 cheeseburgers and not put on a pound, and other people eat a half of one and they put on 5 pounds. So it's very individual, and we have to be very cautious with diets. Another issue is with Guida and Maya, the more you feed Guida, the more Maya has access to food. And Maya already came a little bit chunky. So you don't want Maya to be a giant obese elephant, because we can laugh, but it's really unhealthy for them. So it is finding those moments where they're either separated and you can give Guida extra food. We end up, hay puts a lot of weight back on an elephant. It's concentrated food, but it's a concentrated food that is essentially grass and they can digest it without issue, unlike some of the pelleted food, which they have problems with. So it is a lot of the weight that gets put back on them is generally through hay. Yeah, everybody's different. She did well. I mean, it's like Bambi. Bambi arrived about 1,500 pounds underweight. And you can tell right away that, because you always have that concern about health issues, and none of them have had any health checkups or blood work or anything. So you never know what's wrong with them when they show up. But it's always great to see that their bodies are responding right away to just an appropriate diet. And although we're supplementing with hay, elephants are made to graze, 15, 18, 20 hours a day. Their digestive system is very slow and is very ineffective, unfortunately. So there has to be a lot of food going into their body in little amounts throughout the day for their bodies to function the way they're supposed to. So a big part of it is just them being able to graze for 20 hours a day and put that volume of food into their body makes such a huge difference.
Because you were concerned about her health when she first came, but that obviously passed.
Yeah, she had a colic issue once after coming. But that was the only time we ever had anything like that. She started standing normally.
It was actually quite a while after.
Yeah.
Because actually after they have the 5th yard, if I recall.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
because we brought her in from yard 5.
More than a year and a half after.
Yeah. But it was once, and she did fine afterwards. She was actually really good about it. And Maia, it was one of those moments where you're like, Maia, you're so beautiful. Because, I mean, she can be a little aloof. You know, she likes her alone time. But Guida was sick. She was clearly sick, and she was uncomfortable. And, you know, she's having abdominal pain. So she's stretching and trying to get things to move through her body. And she would lay down. And every time she laid down, Maia's like, I have to stand over you and protect you. She's like, I'm right here. I'm right here. And we brought Guida into the smaller yards. And again, it's still 5 acres of space. But just in case we had to do anything like put her on IV fluids, you know, if things got worse, we were going to have to take different steps. And she was getting injections and different medications. But we kept her in the smaller yards so we could treat her. And you could tell that Maia was getting really bored. Maia is used to walking and exploring, and, you know, she's still head full of steam, not in a negative way, but she just has all of this energy. Aww. But she didn't want to leave her. And it was so cute because as soon as Guida started feeling better, Maia was like, I'm out of here. She's like, I got to go for a run. I will be back. And she came back. But you could tell she wanted to do something else. She wanted to burn off her energy. She wanted to explore, but she was not going to leave Guida until she knew that Guida was okay. Aww. And it was so cute.
Well, I could listen to you both, not only Scott, for ages and learn more about Guida and Maia, but the time is running out. So we're not ending on a cliffhanger this week, but I think 1 or even 2 or even 3 or 4 episodes just will not do Guida and Maia any justice. So I think next time we can definitely meet up again and continue to talk about Guida and Maia. We have a couple of minutes left. So what are today's plans? Elephant feeding time?
I don't know. We're running late today.
It's been a bit of a crazy day already. It's been busy. We actually had a good day today with doing catching up on some footwork. So we were busy with that this morning and did a little more footwork on Lady and Hannah.
Hannah, who had a squeak fest today. She's so funny. Sometimes it's when she's like waiting on you. Sometimes if you're talking on the radio with somebody, and other times she wants you to remember how cute she is just in case you forgot. And she just makes these cute little faces when she does them. And I don't know, she did like 6 in a row or so. Yeah. And we're both right there with her. And she's ridiculously charming.
Yeah. So now we're getting close to the end of the day. Some of the folks are down doing the nighttime feeding or afternoon feeding. So things are starting to wind down. So we're actually hopefully looking to a relatively quiet Saturday evening.
We have to check on Tomas.
Oh, yes, we have. The taper is a little bit down these days. He hasn't been doing well. So we'll have to check on him and medicate him now.
It's just the past 2 days, and he's eating, but he's not eating.
He used to.
With the gusto that he normally eats. So we're just, with wildlife, when you see any little thing, it's already something. So you generally try to be on top of any little change that you see with them. So he's already been started on medication and a few different things, but we just need to check on him and make sure that he's still doing well. Ponto, one of the caregivers, adores him to no end. So he is very good with keeping on top of every little thing about him. So it's great.
Okay. Well, I'll go upstairs and see if I can see the full moon, and I'll let you wind down and enjoy your evening. And then thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule as always. And we'll catch up in 2 weeks' time again.
Sounds great, Nadia. Thanks again for everything.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
That's all for this week. Join us in 2 weeks' time to find out more about Guida and Maia and their discovery of themselves and their friendship at the sanctuary. The first 5 episodes of the Global Rumblings podcast are also available on YouTube, so you can listen to it then. And until then, take care. Bye.